retreat in North Carolina. And for the most part, I am promoting this new book. It's called The Glorious Life of Srila Narottam Das Thakur. And it's not really about promoting a book or, my work or something, but it's about knowing something about our history that's really, really important, enriching, and really valuable for anybody that has anything to do with this movement. So I feel, because of my own, I kind of did this like a hobby at one point. It wasn't, I really want to write a book. It was that in the early 80s, I worked for the Institute for Vaishnava Studies, which is now defunct, but they were in Washington, D.C. And they were getting a lot of old Gaudiya works translated and doing a lot of history study of our lineage. And I had the good fortune, because I spent a lot of time in India, so sort of as a on-the-side work, I used to work with this institute, and they referred to me as the Benglish translator, because they had a kind of bad Bengali translator, and so putting it into English, but then I put it into real English. So it was something where I had the opportunity to start to become immersed in our Gaudiya history in a more personal way, looking at each one of our acharyas separately, and what were their contributions, and who were they as people, and how does that impact on us. And just having the opportunity to do so, when the Institute fell apart, I realized how important it was to my own personal life, my own sadhana, that, hey, I don't want to stop doing this. This has been good for me. So what could I do? I had all these translated works that were not available at that time. This is like early 80s. And so we had a lot of books like the Narottam Vilas, Prem Vilas, things that are now translated, but at that time they weren't. So it was sort of like I was holding on to this little treasure, but it actually belonged to the Institute for Vaishnava Studies, and I couldn't publish it or anything. So I thought, well, maybe I'll write some, maybe I could just write some kids' books, and I could tell the stories of the acharyas. So that's how this book started out many long years ago, as just a kids' book. But, and so it is written in a story format, which young people like to read, but I remember Andrew Maharaj asked me to read it many years ago, and I said, well, it's a kid's book, And then he gave it back to me after he'd read it, and he said, I love that book. That's not a kid's book. That's for everybody, So over time, it kind of grew. I became more interested in this personality. I started out with starting out with Narottam Das Thakur. But it's sort of like when you start to study a personality, and a personality of such extraordinary nature, it just goes deeper and deeper, and there's more layers, and there's more questions, and there's more things you want to find out. So it just kind of became a fun thing to do. And I never was envisioning when will this book come out, So anyway, it was really done about 25 years ago. And then for a variety of reasons, I, services that came up, became a mother, or this, that, the other thing, and some of those books that I had used as resources were then translated. And I didn't see, and then I realized how, when you're a writer, it's hard to be a writer, a publisher, an artist, and do the whole thing. So it just became a little difficult, So it just became a file in my computer, that we'd bring out on Narottam Das Thakur's appearance days. But maybe about 10 years ago, Andrew Maharaj started asking me to give talks and seminars and things about Narottam Das Thakur, because as I came to find out, there are quite a lot of devotees in our movement that have a special loving affinity for Narottam Das Thakur, that somehow has just come into their heart. It's very natural that, when it says that we need to develop an attachment for some liberated soul, that's just a natural thing that happens. It's not something you artificially cultivate. But, for some reason, some devotees just get drawn to, when you hear the songs of Narottam Das Thakur. And also, when you see how much, if you read Srila Prabhupada's books, you'll see that certainly, without any doubt, he was one of Srila Prabhupada's most favorite. Because I remember doing a Veda-based search on different personalities and how many times Prabhupada said their names. And he said Srila Narottam Das Thakur. He quoted him so frequently that, you know, it means something, you know, it's meaningful. It's something that resonated with Srila Prabhupada. And in studying his life, I also began to realize why he may have resonated so much with him. There's so many similarities in their life and in their pastimes. So because many devotees encouraged me after so many years, I finally thought, well, what the heck? Why don't I just publish this book, you know? So finally I have, and I've gotten a very, very good response from, unexpectedly. I really wasn't looking for a result or expecting anything, but I find that there's something that one devotee told me when I started writing this book so many years ago. He's a very really knowledgeable devotee in India, Atma Tattva Prabhu. And he said, oh, you're writing a book about Narottam Das Thakur? And I said, well, I'm trying. And he said, well, you will know if you have done a good job if people cry when they read it. And if they don't cry, if they shed not one tear, then you have not presented Narottam Das Thakur. He said, because there are places in Bangladesh where you just say Narottam Das Thakur and tears come to the eyes of the people. He said, because there's so much emotion and there's so much rasa, so much taste in the whole life of this personality that to know of such a person is so enriching for us, you know, because, I mean, what is everybody doing out in the world? They're reading books, they're looking at movies, they're seeing the superheroes, they're trying to reach some state, some emotional high, you know, some intensity of feeling. But, you know, you only get so much with matter. You know, you're only rubbing certain elements, you know, and you can only get so much out of that rubbing, you know. But when you go into a spiritual personality and you begin to see what is their life, what were their experiences, we then have some hope, some vision, some direction for what's the goal, you know, because we're starting out, we're just in the beginning of a path, but where are we going to wind up? What are we heading for? What are we reaching for? What's the goal? You know, if we don't have it in our mind, I mean, even materially, you know, the management gurus, they'll tell you, you know, begin with the end in mind. And, you know, so especially spiritually, that, you know, we have to know where are we going and why do I want to be there? I mean, does it drive me? You know, so Srila Narottam Das Thakur, the study of his life, I think it very much encourages us by seeing what the goal is and what is really the height of spiritual emotion. And not only does it show us, you know, give us a taste for reaching for the goal, but it also gives us a bigger picture of our place in the history of some remarkable prophecy that has been unfolding. Thank you. It's been unfolding for hundreds of years. Mahaprabhu came, he had a plan, and then one acharya did this to bring it a little further, next acharya brought it a little further, and how they did these things and how they opened the door further so that we sit where we sit now and have access to this, which is, if we see it in the context of the bigger picture, like how the Vedas came into the universe, you know, in its beginning, how they were like packed up, hidden in India, and how the Brahminical hegemony just held it tightly, closely. And, you know, nobody had this stuff. It's existed since the beginning of time. But, you know, how did it slowly, how did it come out, And these are the people, there's people who did the things to bring it out, and that was Lord Chaitanya. How he wanted to open the door to all that wisdom to everybody who never had it before. Just open it up wide, throw it out. You read Chaitanya Charitamrita, how they wanted to open up the storehouse, throw out the contents. And so they did that, but then they needed, it needed to be followed up. So at some point, Mahaprabhu was in Kirtan with his associates, and they're having ecstatic Kirtan, and suddenly he started calling out, Narottam, Narottam, in such ecstasy that tears were streaming from his eyes, and he fell to the ground, nearly unconscious. And devotees were very bewildered. Yeah. Sorry. They were very, very confused, who's Narottam, what's going on, why he's so emotional, what's happening, and he's kept calling out, Narottam, Narottam, and the devotees didn't know what to do. And Mahaprabhu fell on the ground, and Nityananda went down and embraced him, and Mahaprabhu spoke softly to Nityananda Prabhu and said, this Sankirtan mission, it's everything to me. It's my life. He said, but soon you and I will leave this realm. Who will keep this flame of love that I brought into this world? Who will keep it alive? Who will keep it burning? And Nityananda said, my Lord, only you know the answer to that. And he said, who will carry? And is there someone? And Mahaprabhu said, yes, there is someone. And his name is Narottam. And Nityananda Prabhu says, Narottam, I don't know of any Narottam amongst your associates. No, he's not born yet. But on the other side of the Padmavati, in the village of Ketri, Narottam will be born, and he will carry my love. So just to know this one thing about this personality, it's not like a fairy tale. It's a real thing that happened. Lord Chaitanya was here on this planet, and he established something, and he was making a plan for how it would go on. And he was, of all his associates, sorry, thank you. Of all the associates that he could call, like just think, when you have like a serious job that you need done, and it's really, really important, like the most important thing, then, you scan through your mind, you think, who's capable, who's qualified, who could do this? So you imagine that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, the Supreme Lord himself, is scanning through all his glorious associates and defines that this person, Narottam, he will carry the flame. And not that there would be only one flame carrier, but at this particular pastime, he was speaking of him. But even just to know this one thing, then we should understand the importance of such a person. Who is this person that was so dear to Mahaprabhu that before, how many people are famous before they're even born? It's a pretty rare thing. And so the devotees were, they knew about this. They knew, wow, someone is going to come. And then soon after this, there's different commentaries tell the stories in different ways, and it's hard to know the exact stories, but we get the drift. That soon after Mahaprabhu had this conversation with Nityananda Prabhu, he then said, I'm going to go to the bank of the Padma, and I'm going to leave my love there. And so, he said, but keep it quiet. So everyone knew something was going to happen. So then soon after this, they're dancing in Kirtan, they arrive at the Padmavati bank, and then Nitai calls all the devotees and says, now something very extraordinary is about to happen. Watch carefully. And so then Mahaprabhu walks into the water, and as he begins to walk into the Padmavati, the water begins to rise and come over the bank. And suddenly from within the water, the goddess Padmavati appears before everyone, visible before their eyes, and says, "My Lord, how can I serve you?" And so Mahaprabhu says, "I want to leave my love with you." Now this is a puzzling thing that I've often thought about. What is that? How you leave your love with someone? What to speak of the Supreme Lord's love, and how obviously this is a very mystical and such a spiritual thing that, from our level, we can't really comprehend. But at the same time, I'm thinking, like Srila Prabhupada said that I am in my purports. So on very fine and subtle spiritual levels, there's a way that a person conveys himself. So if we can experience that through the books, that Srila Prabhupada is there. So somehow Padmavati was going to hold this. What a glorious service she had. She is holding this love, my goodness. Holding Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's love. And she said, "But yes, my Lord, but how will I recognize who is this Narottam?" And he said, "When a golden complexion boy comes to your bank and he steps into your waters, and then the waters will rise just as they have done today, then you will know that is Narottam." And then you just deliver. So then, of course, the devotees, imagine standing on the bank watching this happen. So this is such an extraordinary, so even before he was born, his appearance, his birth, and everything was so extraordinary that you would want to know, wow, who is this person? So devotees also, all amongst Mahaprabhu's associates, they knew someone named Narottam is coming, sometime. We don't know when, we don't know what generation, sometime in the future. Just like Nitai, there's been many predictions. Oh, some Senabhata Bhakti will come, some general will come to bring to the world, which we know must be Srila Prabhupada. So there are many things that were, hinted at the time, things that will come to pass. This is what will happen. This is what Mahaprabhu didn't just come here for a small job, for some villages in Bengal. He came here for the world. He came here to deliver the whole world. So how will that transpire over time? So like when we come in touch with that and we see that bigger picture, that this is some prophecy that, this will happen and then this will happen and then the doors will open up, and now we have millions of people all over the world singing Narottam Das Thakur's songs every day. Like, that's a miracle. I mean, like every day just singing Shri Guru Charana Padma. Like, how is it this person was alone in the forest who had no concept whatsoever? I mean, Krishna consciousness as we know it had not even grown out of anything. It was just a tiny little thing, in Bengal. So how could they even know, Even the Goswamis, when they were writing, it was said that actually they didn't have a concept. Now that there's going to be like over 500 million books that they, wrote, distributed all over the world. These are like such miraculous things. And actually in a short period of time, and this is our history, it's like our ancestry, and like especially with Indians, ancestry is very important. It's everything, what's your gotra, what's your line, But this is our line. This is our spiritual line. And it's so glorious, and it's so, that the thing is, you can never really be depressed or fried or miserable if you really understand what we're part of. It's if we open our eyes to the broader picture that we're part of a prophecy that's unfolding, and it's actually unfolding miraculously. I mean, only 50 years ago, nobody even heard of Krishna around the world. Really. I mean, just in my lifetime, what has happened is so extraordinary. I mean, nobody, when I first, when we went out on the street, 19 years old, and, we were like total freaks. No one had ever heard of Krishna. They didn't know what we were talking about, And Prabhupada transported an entire spiritual culture, from one part of the world to the other. And now we just see. So even though when we're in our small, like kind of ISKCON world, sometimes we can get like, this is happening, that's, be disappointed or discouraged or, whatever it may be, when our vision is too small. But when we broaden our vision and know who is standing here that we're coming to see, and what was Mahaprabhu's mission and how we're part of it, and the value of it. Studying these acharyas, it's not just like, reading any old story. It really does something for you. It really opens up doors so that you feel very grateful, that if he hadn't done that, what if they hadn't done that, I should tell a little more about Narottam. I'm just kind of randomly rambling. But, so Narottam was born in that town of Khetri, and he was born into a very extraordinary family of, Raj Krishnananda Datta was the king of Khetri, and so he was born into great wealth and aristocracy, and he was the only son. So they were older also before they had this son. So, in Indian culture, first of all, the importance of having kids, then having son, and then having the only son, and then the son of the king. So he was important. He was very important to his family and very important to the town of Khetri. Like, everyone was just, so happy, Rajkumar Narottam, he's born, he was the prince of the town, and everyone loved him. And he was shown very, very exalted qualities, really, just as a very young boy. And so he was exposed. He was exposed to a lot as the son of a king. So Raj Krishnananda Dutt and Narayani, his mother, they were known as very very, very generous to the sadhus or pilgrims passing through, that they would make all arrangements. So kind of the word was out for anybody that was on pilgrimage or sadhus or any traveling people like that. Oh, go to Khetri. Krishnananda Datta takes care of everybody. So they always had things set up. So Narottam had the opportunity as a young boy that very regularly he would hear pravachan, he would go with his father, and they would sit and they would listen. And his parents were, as parents are, they're so happy when they see their kids sitting nicely and listening, and Narottam was very, very attentive. And so they were charmed by that, oh, he's going to be a good king, He's attentive, he can listen nicely, he respects the sadhus and everything. And he used to talk about them like little, in his childish way, Baba, why don't we, run away and go to a dharmshala, and we could go on pilgrimage. And, he would talk like that after hearing, the sadhus talk, and his mother and father thought that it was so charming and cute that he had this attraction. Oh, Naru, these are great people, these sadhus, we can honor them, but we can never become like them, And then Narottam was thinking, he was very little, but he was thinking, well, I want to become like them. So even from very young. So then he had an opportunity quite soon. He was probably, 4, 5, 6, like that. And he was looking out one day from the palace, and he could see that a whole large group, it used to be that many pilgrims that were on their way for Rath Yatra, many Vaishnavas and others were passing through. So they would set up big tents and have, huge walks cooking to, for feed all the pilgrims. And so Narottam was watching, and he used to really enjoy watching these pilgrims. And he was looking out the window, and he was looking at the faces of the people. And he was thinking, what did they see when they went? They're coming back from Puri. Their faces, they shine, they look very bright. And what did they see that makes their faces shine like that? And it's funny because I was just thinking, it flashed in my mind that, when I first saw the devotees, I was in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco in 1968. And I remember I was like looking at devotees doing kirtan, and I was thinking like similarly, why are they so like shiny and they look like so bright, and like they're like somewhere that I've never been, and I've like taken every drug and everything, and they're somewhere else, in their eyes you could see, and you don't know. It's a puzzling thing, but it's very attractive. And I thought, what have they got? Where are their heads at, So it was like this was driving Narottam that, wow, I wanted to go see, So he asked, and he was always guarded. He was so overly protected. You imagine, the only son of the king. Really protected, couldn't go anywhere, couldn't, and nowhere alone. So he was, he asked a guard, could you take me out? And so he went out, and he's wandering amongst the pilgrims, and he's very fascinated to hear them and hear their discussions. And then he was captivated by one particular elderly pilgrim, and everyone was around him, and he was speaking katha. So he said, oh, I want to listen, So he went over, and this devotee, his name was Krishnadas, and he's an old associate of Mahaprabhu. And he's speaking the glories of Mahaprabhu. And Narottam was just absolutely fascinated, drawn completely. And that was the beginning of the end for Narottam's material life. And because he was so drawn. And so he cultivated this relationship with Krishnadas, and he was known as a very great sadhu. So, the palace doors were open to sadhus. So I said, don't worry, Narottam, because Narottam, after he started to speak to him, and he was like firing questions. Well, who is Mahaprabhu? Where is he? What is... And he came to know that Mahaprabhu had just left the world not long before. And this also was a beginning of his mood of Vipralamba Bhava, that was the predominant emotion of his life, that just drove him, this feeling of separation, deep, deep feeling of separation, that's very intense feeling that he had throughout his life, and started at this very young age when he met Krishnadas. And then Krishnadas said, don't worry, Naro, there's so much I can tell you. I will come every day to the palace. And so from that day, he started coming. And every day, that was like Narottam's life, to hear. And he heard about all the associates of Mahaprabhu, one by one, Rup, Sanatan, and these became like his Superman, his heroes, the people that, wow, I want to meet them, I want to know them. And he became, obsessed, actually, that he wasn't interested. And, slowly, for the parents, it started to be not so cute anymore, like a little worrisome. It's nice to be a good kid and all, but, don't get carried away. Don't go running off with those Hare Krishnas. We know about that. And, so they started to worry a bit because he didn't seem to have any other interests. And, Naru, you have kingly responsibilities, you have to get your training, you have to, you have duties to do, and, you can't just sit and listen, But Narottam, the flame was so strong in his heart that it was burning. And, I can't actually, how long do we go on here? Another 15 minutes or 10 minutes or so? Uh-huh. So, 15 minutes. Yeah. Yeah, whatever. So, it started to be of a concern, of the parents. And they started to talk about, well, we've got to kind of get him away, but we didn't want to insult this great sadhu, Krishnadas, so they couldn't just say like, hey, could you not come so much? And so they started lining up, well, we have to start setting up things, so his training, his schooling, and in so many ways they tried to distract him from this overhearing thing, And but Narottam was becoming so immersed. And this is the thing, this is where everything begins, is by hearing about great souls. That is the importance of these kind of books and this kind of knowledge of the great, because really this whole movement was built on this principle. When I joined, I didn't see Prabhupada for a long time. He didn't come. I joined in 1970 in Detroit, and Prabhupada didn't come, for a year. And, in that year I already opened 2 temples and, did so many things. But how did we do all those things? We were just a bunch of kids, but everyone was talking about Prabhupada. Everyone was talking about, and everyone was so on fire with the glories of Srila Prabhupada and who he was. And here we are, we're young kids, really. Most of us were between 18 and 25, in that whole temple. And we were doing so many things, but it was on the basis of hearing about Srila Prabhupada. It was really around Srila Prabhupada. So, actually, the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita and Chaitanya Bhagavat, the emphasis is on the importance of your connection with the devotee. Because it's the devotee that has Krishna in his heart. And it's the devotee that gives that to another person. It's not a direct process. We don't go immediately to Krishna. We go through the devotee. What's that verse? Sadavo Hridayant. That this. I am in the heart of the sadhu, and so therefore, for us to connect with the heart of a sadhu is really the most important thing that we have to do, because they will take us to where we need to go. We won't get there alone, and we won't get there directly through Krishna, but through these devotees. And this is a practical realization I've had through these studies, that you begin to realize that these people, they're not dead and gone. They're here for us. They did all these austerities and all these things that they did in their life was, so that we now have purpose and meaning, and we have direction, we know the goal of life. So they're not forgotten us. They're not gone. That it's not like the spiritual world is 100 million miles away or something. That's like a material concept. It's just a covering. The spiritual realm is around us. It's present, and the personalities are present. Srila Prabhupada is present for us, and great devotees see that, Often they see another, like Prabhupada in London, oh, didn't you see Narada Muni was here? Lord Brahma was here during a program. I said, oh, Prabhupada, I'm so sorry that nobody came. What? No one came? You didn't see Narada Muni? You didn't see Lord Brahma? So... for when because we're covered, and because we're in such a small, covered consciousness, we're not seeing. That's why the value of connecting with these personalities, and then we realize, wow, this is who do I want to be with? What kind of people do I want to be with? Who do I want to hang out with for eternity? Well, these are the people. So then when we actually feel that they are there and they're present for us, we're not alone, we're not, nobody knows what I'm going through, or, it's not like that. They are there, and they want to help, they want to help us. And so when we learn their histories and who they are, and how they lived and how they're present, and enter into their books, their songs, their everything, then more and more that becomes more real than the so-called real world that we're living in, which is not the real world, the temporary world. And the real world becomes more real to us. These people, these are who I'm going to be with, these are who I want to be present with. So here we see in the life of Narottam, this is what happened to him. He started hearing about Rup, Sanatan, Lokanath Goswami. He started hearing, and his life changed completely. And then his path became clear. So this is not just something that happened to him, but this happens. When we hear, this is what happened to all of us. When we heard about Prabhupada, and then, oh wow, okay, this is where we're going, So it's such an essential feature, this hearing about the great souls, and our acharyas and our line, because these are the greatest people who have walked the face of this earth. And they're our ancestors. And that we're connected, So when you feel that connection, then it gives so much strength and gives so much satisfaction that, what worries are there for us, And then you can understand why Prahlad Maharaj said, oh, I don't have no worries for me, but I'm just worried about all these poor suffering people out here that don't know anything about you, So that's how a devotee becomes to that stage, because their connection with the personalities, the great personalities, the liberated souls, connected in the spiritual realm, becomes very real to us, And that's why we're doing every morning our pujas, and we say we enter into that relationship. And then slowly that becomes more and more real to us, where, the unreal things of this world that are very short and temporary, have less meaning, less importance. They less to drag us in or drag us down, or, whatever. So this is what was happening with Srila Narottam. At the time they called him Naru. And so he, through this hearing, he became just captivated. And he couldn't help it. He didn't want to hurt his family. He didn't want to let them down. But he couldn't help it. He was so drawn. And so at night he could hardly sleep, and he would just cry. And he would cry throughout the night and beg, please, Rup, Sanatan. He would call out to everyone. And he knew also that Mahaprabhu's associates, they were old, but they were still, many of them, around. But it wasn't going to necessarily go on for long. So he knew there was a time frame. I've got to get out of here. And he started realizing that he was, trapped in this identity that he's Rajkumar Narottam, and that he was expected to become the king. And so he was always praying, how can this happen? How can I get to Vrindavan? He just wanted to get to Vrindavan. And then one night, he had the most remarkable dream. And Sri Nityananda Prabhu, very beautiful form of Nitai, appeared before him and said, Naru, wake up. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has left the most glorious gift for you at the bank of the Padmavati. Go receive your gift. So you imagine, in the middle of the night, Naru, and normally there's guards all around and whatever, but somehow or another he gets out and he goes down to the bank of the Padmavati. Now, he hadn't been to the Padmavati before, even though it's interesting, because the astrologer had said, when he'd read the charts, that's one of the first things they do when somebody's born in India, bring the astrologers together and let's see, look at his nature is, So they were like glorifying, like amazing chart of a most glorious person. But, and then one astrologer was, just one thing, it seems like something about rivers, it's a little dangerous for him. Something. And so, they're terrified immediately, any danger to our little Naru, So he didn't go to the Padmavati, they brought a little kun there. No, don't worry, we'll bring Padmavati to you. So he went for that first night, he went to the Padmavati. And sure enough, when he started to walk into the Padmavati, the water started to rise, just in the same way as when Lord Chaitanya came. And then the goddess Padmavati appeared before Narottam. And she said, Narottam, I have been holding this for you. Please kindly take. So is described in many ways, but it's such a beyond belief, incredible, transcendental thing that happened that I don't know if it ever happening before or ever happening since, that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu entered in, it says, like a small golden boy he saw coming towards him, and entered into his body and engulfed his being, that the mood of Mahaprabhu and the love of Mahaprabhu entered into his body. And the intensity of that experience was so profound that he just literally became like a mad person, crying, laughing, jumping, dancing, he lost control of himself. Because imagine the potency of this love entering him, So it said that even his complexion changed, that he became more golden color, much more effulgent, became very, very effulgent, very golden in color. And so here he was, dancing like a madman in ecstasy, calling out Gauranga, Gauranga on the bank of the Padmavati. And meanwhile, the family finds out that Naru's not in his room, so all panic ensues, and everyone starts running, and the whole town's looking for Naru, and they finally come down and find him, dancing like a crazy person. And so they can't in any way possibly comprehend what has happened to him, and he realizes that they're there. He comes out a little bit enough to realize that, everybody's here. He'd try to be normal, but, then he'd think, that golden boy, and he would, become ecstatic again. And so he was trying, but it was just not possible, and they were just, everyone's so distraught, Narottam's gone mad. He's a crazy person, And they were thinking, we heard that there was some Brahma Rakshasa that was in this nearby tree, and probably this Rakshasa attacked him, and he's, gone inside his body, and that's all they could think, They couldn't think anything more, So somehow we drag him home, bring him home, bring the tantrics, get him exercised, and get the ghosts out of him, or, the evil spirits, whatever, bring the peacock feathers, and, all the stuff they do. And, but after they'd done that, the tantric said, he's not, there's nothing in him, that this is not there's no ghost in him. And they're like, yeah, but what could it be? What could it be? Why he's crazy? Why he's gone crazy? And then, slowly, we can't tell the whole story, but, gradually it comes out that, because they're trying so many different things. There's an imbalance of air, vata, you should get some fox oil, some kind of something from some animal that you rub on his stomach or something. And then Narottam was like, Baba, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just overcome with love for God. And I can't stop the feelings that keep arising in my heart. And the only cure for this disease is just let me go to Vrindavan and let me fulfill my heart's desire. And so, of course, go to Vrindavan, what madness. You're just a little boy, no. And so then it became, a real torture, and it was a bit of a long story, and it's in the book, of how Narottam did, but he was not their little Naru anymore, and he couldn't change what had happened to him, and he had to follow that path, and it was difficult, and it prayed, and it took some time, but eventually he ran away from home, and you imagine, this is a boy. It's hard to say when it comes to ages, like everybody wants to know, well, how old was he? But in all of these books, because in the Vedic writing, it's always about rasa and tattva. And it's not about linear history like the West. Western history is like this happened and then this happened and then it's in a line, and and it was this year and he was this old. But you just don't find that, like in Shastra, you hardly find, the dates, the times, places, because it wasn't considered important. Like very often I meet Indian people and I say, hey, oh, how old are you? I'm around 30. They don't really know because they don't care, because it's a different set of values. So they have a different perspective on things, but to the best of what we can kind of figure, that he was somewhere between 12 and 16 probably when he actually ran away. So you're talking about a kid that's been pampered to death for his whole life and lived in a palace, and now running barefoot in the forest at top speed. And what that must have been like. How old are you? You're 13. Okay, so about your age. Like, imagine getting dropped off in the Amazon jungle, and you've got to go, to how many? What is it, like at least a couple thousand miles, across an entire country alone. No water, no food, no Google Maps. No nothing, no signposts even, how did you do that, and how difficult, it's not even conceivable for people like us that go on the highway and you drive, and the signs everywhere and the lights on the this is jungle, and wild, and he can't really walk on the main roads, because everyone is going to be searching for him. Hundreds of people are going to be searching for this boy. So it's that he had ran and ran and ran and ran until he was crawling on the ground. So, and there's stories along the lines of what happened on that journey. But it's a very remarkable thing. Imagine, and what was drawing him was his love for the devotees. It was the love of, that he'd heard of Rup, Sanatan, and he had to meet them. He had to meet them. Maybe they were going to be gone when he got there. And, so such a young boy. Imagine having that kind of drive. Like, wow. That's tough, you rugged stuff, to be so, I want it so bad that I don't care. And that even at some point, he became discouraged, he's not he's just a human being. And, he became very discouraged, and he was crawling, literally crawling on the ground. He was so tired, and he was so, hungry, skinny, everything. And he was thinking, maybe I'm never going to make it to Vrindavan. Maybe it's never going to happen, And so he fell exhausted on the ground, and then he looked up and he saw there was a young boy there with a pot of milk. And he was like shocked. Where has this boy come from? And he's holding milk. But he was so exhausted, so tired, that he just fainted away anyway, as much as he was hungry for that milk, that he just couldn't, like he fainted. And in that faint, he saw Rup and Sanatan came before him. And he describes, like he could smell that they had a beautiful fragrance, and he could hear them, chanting the Maha Mantra, and he could see, he describes their beauty. And how they put their hands on his chest and they said, Narottam, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has brought milk for you. Kindly drink and go on your way. You will make it to Vrindavan, don't fear. So then he woke up, and naturally, he drank that milk really fast. And he became completely invigorated, so then encouraged, But this happens, in life to devotees, that very often, we may go through like a dry desert where you're crawling in the dirt and you feel like you're never going to get anywhere. And you feel like, maybe I'll give up, or, whatever. In life, sometimes it happens. But then Krishna is always there. Something happens, some devotee comes, some prasadam comes, something, in some form to encourage us, because Krishna wants us to keep going, and we will reach the goal, but we have to just keep going. And do we keep talking during Arti? Yeah. Where I grew up, we didn't do that, but we'll do it if that's what we do here. Yeah. And so anyway, so Narottam was encouraged, so he did. I'm not going to tell what happened in Mathura when he arrived, because that's just too devastating. Can't tell it. You have to read the book. But that's really something, what happens when he arrives in Mathura finally. You imagine. I mean, you wonder, it must have taken many months for him to arrive there, to get from that side, many months. I mean, for a little boy, I mean, it's so amazing. I mean, it's just, there's so much that's amazing about his story. Everything is amazing. And, so he did arrive in Vrindavan, and they knew, like, there was Jiva Goswami there. They were waiting, and they knew that this boy is going to come, So he arrived in Vrindavan at just such a glorious time, because you imagine just not long before, not so long ago, Lokanath Goswami and Bhagarabha Goswami were the first two who were sent by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Vrindavan. And, it was said when Lokanath went there, it was nothing but a hunting place for Muslim royalty. There was nothing going on there. Vrindavan was covered, very covered. And although there may have been some devotees there and still some remnants and still some remembrance, but very covered. So when Lokanath Goswami, and this is one of the most, Narottam became most enchanted when he learned the story of Lokanath Goswami from Krishnadas. He was the one that really fascinated him, because Lokanath Goswami was like around the age of Mahaprabhu, and he had association with him when he was young, and then they were separated at some time, and Lokanath always wanted to come and just stay with Mahaprabhu. So finally, he was able to break away and be with Lord Chaitanya when he was in Navadvip, before he took sannyas. And but when Lokanath arrived, as soon as he arrived, Mahaprabhu said, "Oh, Lokanath, you're here. I have such a special mission for you." And then Lokanath was like, "Oh, what mission does he have for me?" And so the next day, Mahaprabhu said, "I want you to go to Vrindavan." And, Lokanath was just broken-hearted, totally broken-hearted. Imagine the dream of your life is that I'm going to go and I'm going to be with Lord Chaitanya and I'm going to stay with him for the rest of my life. And that's all I want to do, and I don't want anything else. And he's been like working to try to do that, to break away. I think his parents died, and then finally he could leave, and, whatever it was. And so he arrives, and the day after he gets there, then they're telling him, go to Vrindavan. And he is crying and begging Mahaprabhu, "Why are you so mean to me? Why are you kicking me away? Why are you doing this to me? What have I done to offend you?" And and Mahaprabhu's just, "No, I'm giving you, don't you understand what is Vrindavan? I'm giving you the whole spiritual world. I'm giving you, Vrindavan is my heart. I'm giving you my heart." And he said, "No, I don't care about Vrindavan. I don't care about you. I don't care about any of that. I just want to go." Hare Krishna. Thank you. Wasn't quite sure what was coming at me. Like, what am I supposed to do? And so Lokanath Goswami was just devastated. And then finally, there was a long, it's in the book, a long discussion, how to convince Lokanath. And then, but what finally convinced him, of course, was that Mahaprabhu, for his pleasure, that the highest thing that there is even if you handle me roughly by your embrace, or whatever it is that you want to do, whatever will please you. So then he saw that Mahaprabhu really will be happy. This is how to make him happy. And so my sadness is going to make him happy, so I have to take that sadness. So then that became his happiness also, because in the sadness he'll be happy because he's given happiness to Lord Chaitanya. It's a little complicated how that happens. But it does. That because in the material world, we think that if I make myself happy, then I get happy. But somehow it doesn't work because we keep doing it, but we keep still not feeling satiated. It never stops. Oh, I keep trying to get happy. And I got something, but I'm still not happy. So I have to try and get more. You know, it's backwards. See, the thing is, you don't do what you want to do. You do what pleases the Lord. And then even if at first it's not an appealing idea, and it doesn't sound like what you would, from your conditioned nature, that I would feel like doing, but if you do that for him, that's love. Love is, the more unselfish we become, the more we become fully happy. You know, the more selfish we are, the more miserable we are. I mean, it's just the way it is. It's just the spiritual facts. So so Lokanath, he had to accept. So he you know, went to Vrindavan when there was nothing there, you know. So by the time Narottam arrived there, Lokanath Goswami had been there many years, and then the Goswamis had come one by one, and Vrindavan had become a flourishing spiritual center, and it was like an amazing place to be. You imagine the association, what was going on, and it was the time of the writing and the copying of the books, and like it was absolutely exciting. It's sort of like, you know, like the beginning of ISKCON days or something, where you just start opening up temples, and there was nothing, and then there was another temple, and then there was more deities, and then this, you know, so it's very exciting and very, so that was what Narottam arrived to. And of course many extraordinary, wonderful things happened during that time. And but I'll you know, push forward because, you know, obviously we can't tell the whole story, but just to know another major contribution that he made that impacted on our lives majorly, is what happened to him after he'd been in Vrindavan for many, many years, and living this extraordinary experience. I mean, like really in Vrindavan, you know, not like living on top of Vrindavan, like living in Vrindavan. And, you know, associating with the most glorious personalities there and serving his Guru Maharaj, Lokanath Maharaj. And then one day, Sri Jiva Goswami says, I want to have a big festival during Kartik. And he called together Narottam, Srinivas, and Shamananda, who were students together under Sri Jiva Goswami. And they were very tight friends. And that's another thing about Narottam Das, that one of the hallmarks of his life was the love he had for his friends. That he had very, very deep, deep friendships that were lifelong. And I mean, we hear it in the songs. He's just calling out to his friends. Ramachandra, Sangha, Mage, you know, all these people that he loved so deeply. So he had such deep, loving friendships, which, you know, that really keeps people going in spiritual life, you know. And very important thing. It's not a material thing. He's not calling out like, you know, it's a spiritual thing. And so this festival began, that everyone all over Vrindavan, Mathura, Radhakund came for this big festival that Sri Jiva was having for Kartik. And everyone figured something was up, but they didn't really know what was up. And so after they'd had, you know, days of kirtan and this and that, then finally Sri Jiva Goswami announces that, you know, for years and years we've been writing books, compiling them here, stocking them up, and now is the time for these books to go out. and to go to Bengal, all the devotees over there, you know, the Bengal devotees, they hadn't heard, you know, because Rupa and Sanatan, they had their time with Mahaprabhu in Benares and Prayag, and then they went to Vrindavan, and then they started writing. So all the devotees in Bengal, they didn't know these things. Things had not been systematized. They had not been, you know, written in a way. They just loved Lord Chaitanya, you know, and they did kirtan. But, you know, the whole philosophical presentation, this came from Rupa and Sanatan, and this was all being done in Vrindavan. So there was somewhat of a disconnect between the Vrindavan and the Bengali devotees, although there was always a connection in that Sri Jiva Goswami was always in touch with Janavamata, but, you know, in touch is not like, you know, okay, you know, a text, you know, you send somebody over a couple of months and a few months back and a few, you know, so, but how they could keep in touch, they did keep in touch. But now the devotees were waiting. They knew this is all going on in Vrindavan. They have no access to these incredible books of the Goswamis. And so the announcement was made that now is the time, and the people to do it is this Narottam, Srinivas, and Shamananda. And these boys, they're like shocked. This is the first they're hearing about it at this festival, and they're just, you know, unbelievable. They just thought they were going to spend their life in Vrindavan with their gurus, and this was another. I mean, and that's also I won't go in any more about that, but just to think about what they had to do, you know, that they had to leave all of this behind. They had to leave Vrindavan. And what it was like to say goodbye to Vrindavan, to say goodbye to Gopal Bhatta Goswami, to Raghunath Das Goswami, to Lokanath Goswami, to Sri Jiva Goswami, to the love that they had for each other and the experiences that they had had. And they know they're probably not going to see any of them again. So, you know, to go and say goodbye to, you know, also Radhakund, Govardhan, you know, say goodbye to Vrindavan. They don't know at that time if they're ever going to see any of them again. So they took that journey. It was a really, really, really big sacrifice. And, you know, packing those books and then, you know, on bullock carts, carrying these books. So this is the beginning this is the first book distribution that took place in our line. And so this is, you know, one major contribution. And what if they hadn't done it? They said, no, man, I want to stay in Vrindavan. You know, I don't want to go to Bengal. I don't want to do that, you know. Then where would we be? You know, so, you know, because people have made these incredible sacrifices, we therefore sit where we sit, you know. And then if we continue to make sacrifices, there will be many, many people in the future who will sit also similarly because we've made the effort, you know. So that's our line, you know, is giving. It's not taking. We're not takers, you know. Spiritual world is giving. Material world, that's a difference. It's pretty simple, basic, right down to the bare bones is that material world means takers, spiritual world means givers. You know, so Srila Narottam Das Thakur was one of the greatest givers, and that's just like a drop in the bucket of, you know, what he did and what he. But I think I'll end now, and if any of you are interested, we do have some books here, and they're very. It's a very easy read. It's like a novel. It's written like a story form, so even, you know, young kids like to read it too. You know, so. All right, it's very nice to be here. Thank you for listening. And Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.